Your brain needs support, and new Ollie Brainy Chews are a delightful way to take care of your cognitive health. Made with scientifically backed ingredients like Thai ginger, L-theanine, and caffeine, Brainy Chews support healthy brain function and help you find your focus, stay chill, or get energized. Be kind to your mind and get these nootropic chews at ollie.com. That's OLLY.com. These statements have not been evaluated by the Food and Drug Administration. This product is not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease.
Today on CityCast Chicago, all of them expensive eggs at the grocery store might have you sometimes daydreaming like, wouldn't it be nice if I had some chickens all to myself? And maybe you're like me and you shaking your head thinking, ain't no way you're allowed to do that in the big city. But actually, there really aren't that many rules when it comes to keeping livestock in Chicago. So here's everything you need to know. It's Wednesday, May 29th. I'm Jacoby Cochran, and this is what Chicago's talking about. Today we are joined by Viviana Okapu, who is with Advocates for Urban Agriculture. Viviana, welcome to CityCast Chicago.
Thank you so much, Kobe. I'm happy to be here.
Viviana, this question came up from one of our CityCast Chicago listeners who was wondering, what type of backyard livestock can Chicagoans own? They live on the Northwest side and they have chickens, but the number one question people ask when they see a chicken, ducks, goat living in someone's backyard, they're always like, is that legal? And the truth is, I also often have the same question because even though I have a few friends who have chickens at home, I've never really been familiar on what you can or what you can't do. And so we reached out to you and brought you in. Let's start with sort of the basic backyard livestock 101. What kind of farm animals can you keep in Chicago?
Really, it's going to just come down to how much space you have. For chickens, you need at least 4 square feet inside of a coop per chicken. For goats, you need at least 400 square feet for every 2 goats, right? Because they are not animals that typically like to be solo, right? They have to have a buddy. Technically, the way that laws are set up right now, you could have a cow, but you need enough space to be able to graze that cow. There is very few restrictions on the types of animals that you can keep when it comes to farmed animals. If you're trying to keep a tiger, that's a whole nother
That's a whole nother Netflix documentary.
Precisely. You can have chickens, you can have goats, you can technically have that cow. I've met a couple of people with pigs in the city of Chicago as well.
Do the limitations on how many animals you can own in the city, is it mostly dictated by space, or is there a rule like even if you had an abundance of land, you can still only have so many chickens, so many goats, so many cows?
Yeah, as it stands currently, there is not a limit. Per property, you are only allowed to have 5 beehives, for example, but that's pretty much the only thing that is specifically regulated right now. That doesn't mean that there hasn't been attempts to regulate it further many times throughout the years.
So obviously there are rules on how much space you need proportional to each animal, but what about rules around how they are kept in terms of maybe limiting noise, how your chicken coops need to be built? What are laws kind of governing, the proper way of caring for these animals?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the issue that comes up the most often. People are wondering like, oh, I hear this rooster in my neighborhood and I'm so tired of hearing it, or elders might get complaints about stuff like that, right? And so there's already laws on the books for all of that, right? So excessive noise, right, is one of those things that you might encounter when it comes to animals, just as you would a dog, and then also just making sure that you're keeping things sanitary, right? So making sure that they have clean water on a regular basis, making sure that, there isn't excessive smell coming from your yard to the point that it becomes a nuisance to your neighbors. That's really when it becomes an issue, is when it starts becoming an issue for the people around you, and calls start going into alders offices, that sort of thing, if they're not talking to you first. Ideally, before you even get animals like this, you would want to engage your neighbors. It's important to have those conversations first. So it's pretty much just noise and sanitation that are the main regulations that exist currently. There are fines, certainly. If you get a citation from Streets and Sanitation, for example, they could cite you for just having unhealthy conditions, and then you would have to, you would be fined until you get that cleaned up. But the same goes for, keeping other types of animals as well, if it's becoming a nuisance beyond just your property.
So I have a homegirl who raises chickens, as I just learned in the last couple of weeks, and she plans on getting those eggs, maybe sharing them with their community. But if we're thinking about like ducks, goat, or even chickens, and your plan is to raise them for meat or for slaughter, is that allowed? And if so, are you allowed to do all of that on your property?
In the city of Chicago, you are allowed to raise animals, and if you intend to slaughter, that is your choice. However, you cannot slaughter them on your own property. It's definitely illegal to slaughter animals on your own property. You have to take them to a properly USDA certified, butcher.
You got to bring somebody else into the process. You should not be in a shed in the backyard down in Hegwish going at it.
Yeah, definitely not recommended. Technically illegal, just because of the food safety aspect of it, right? There's a lot of things, like if you don't know what you're doing, there's a lot of ways to make yourself sick. So it's best to, leave it to the folks who are professionally certified in processing animals in that kind of way.
So if I'm understanding correctly, Viviana, you have been keeping chickens for a while now. Please tell us about them. Their names, what's their personality, how many you got?
Yeah, I've been keeping chickens in my backyard on the far south side since 2015. So wild that it's been 9 years at this point.
Yeah.
And right now I have 5 chickens. All of them have ridiculous names, with help from friends and kids to give them.
I need
all
a couple of them. Come on. I need a couple of them.
There's William Cleopatra Wallace, Queen Mike Tyson, Captain Blue Sparkletoes, to name a few.
I'm loving that. And what are they like? What are their personalities like? Do they have distinct personalities? They got unique names. Can you tell the difference between them outside of just maybe their appearance?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, currently they all look different, so that helps. We've also had, I had a friend who passed who had chickens as well, and so we inherited a part of her flock. And introducing those chickens, chicken fights are a thing. Like, people have been betting on chicken fights since time immemorial, probably, because they will fight. So they can be a little territorial. Pecking order is a real thing. They absolutely have personalities, distinct personalities. Who gets to eat first? Who's going for that snack first? Is absolutely something that you will witness in raising chickens for sure. The experience of raising them has been really rewarding for me, because they're an animal that lives outside, and much like people are thinking about walking their dogs every day or feeding their cat every day, we're taking care of these chickens every day, making sure they got feed and water and everything that they need to be okay, and collecting the eggs is a nice little way that they're able to pay their rent, and we're able to get some food and an additional benefit of keeping that particular type of animal.
Are you all able to have roosters? I imagine those can get very loud and annoy neighbors very quickly, but does the city regulate whether or not you can keep roosters as well?
So currently the way that the code is, you can keep roosters. However, it is pretty commonly known that roosters do crow, they make a lot of noise, and you can't really control that. So it's definitely not encouraged to keep roosters in the city of Chicago, but it is possible. Really, it's just a matter of having those good relationships with your neighbors so that they know that if that rooster is driving them nuts and they really are tired of hearing it, that they talk to you first before they start calling the alder's office to try and get you a citation.
I'd love to know a little bit more about what that rent process or that egg laying harvesting process looks like, how it works. I mean, how it feels to get your own eggs versus having to go to the store. Like what does that look like for you and for your community?
Yeah, no, definitely a major bonus of keeping chickens for sure, especially a couple of years ago when egg prices were skyrocketing. They lay every day.
I didn't even realize that. I guess I didn't know that. It's not like a seasonal long process. It's just throughout the year constant.
It changes with the season for sure. So
okay.
the amount of eggs that you get is typically proportional to the amount of sunlight and warmth that we're getting. So in the spring, it was like all of a sudden like, oof, we have to like try and keep up with all the eggs that we're getting. But in the winter, they're a lot slower about it because there's not as many sunlight hours to inspire them to lay more eggs. And that's just like not in their biology to typically lay as much during that time of year. You could add something like a heat lamp or some alternative sunlight inside of the coop as well to kind of simulate that.
Another egg question before I ask some more hen questions. And maybe this is my own ignorance. How do you know the difference between breakfast eggs and baby chick eggs? Is there a difference?
Each egg in and of itself is considered an ovum, right? So very similar to the egg in humans. And if it's not fertilized, then it will just stay an ovum or an egg, right? So the typical eggs that you crack open, you see your yolk, you eat that, right? However, if someone has a rooster, there is a chance that you might get some fertilized eggs, which would then become chicks, right? So it's really a matter of certainty around whether you have a mature rooster or not to even make that a possibility. And then it's also just keeping an eye on the chickens themselves because their behavior will change if they have a little baby, because they're going to be, or if they have an egg, right? Because they'll be nesting and
more protective
sitting on it,
and
keeping it warm. Exactly. So their behavior will change as well. But otherwise, if it's all hens, then you can pretty much guarantee, there's no like, tomcat, like rooster type things coming in the yard. It's not typical.
Like,
so
you got to worry about with your dogs and your cats, like alley cat, stray dog, the neighbor's dog, the neighbor's cat. But here it's just like, ain't a lot of roosters just like walking up and down the Chicago alleys.
Exactly.
What does your chicken's diet consist of, and how has that changed as you've learned more?
Yeah. So we give them an organic feed, which typically is grains, but then it's also mixed in with different seeds as well as shells. So a really common feed addition will be oyster shells, but in addition to that, we also take their own shells, like, once we eat our eggs and crack them open, we set them aside, let them dry out, crush that up, and then put it back in the feed so that they have all the calcium that they need to continue creating eggs. I mean, it's just recycling. It's just composting and recycling. So, there's that. That's their typical regular diet. You always want to make sure they have plenty of fresh water every single day. And then, they are one of the most efficient composters. Worms are pretty good, but chickens are pretty great also. If you ever have any scraps from the kitchen, there's a very wide variety of the things that they can eat. So, like, for example, all this past week, they have eaten so many watermelon rinds and they're just delighted.
As you've had them for the last 9 years, have you ever had conflict with your neighbors over the chickens? And were there times where like you just had to make adjustments sort of based on your own knowledge, just like things you could have done differently?
My neighbors have been great about it. If anything, quite often, like, our backyard and the way that the coop is set up is that it faces the alley, right? So we get visitors all the time, especially little kids, but lots of curious adults as well, just coming in to like check them out, see what's going on, get to know them. It's an attraction, honestly, for folks. So that's definitely just, people being really excited and friendly about it has definitely helped to just kind of build the community and relationship around these chickens. As far as my immediate neighbors, they'll definitely hear some clucking and stuff like that, but it never gets so raucous. But regardless, I like to make sure that we make the eggs available to our neighbors as well, because why not?
For people who may have just gone out and just got chickens because they thought it was trendy or very cool, or they really thought it was a great idea, what do you think are like the biggest mistakes people make out the gate that you want folks to avoid?
In most cases, people are going to have something of a chicken coop, right? That chicken coop also needs to have a run where the chickens can roam but still be protected from other animals, right? So making sure they have enough space for sure, but also recognizing that this is a daily task. Unless you get an automatic chicken coop opener and closer, you have to wake up with the chickens to open up that coop. And if you're out and, at some event at night, like at some point you need to make sure you come home and close that coop, because there's a possibility for, things like raccoons or possums, even coyotes, depending on where you're at, to come in and attack the chickens. So
have you ever had a scenario where a predator came in or somebody just tried to bogart them out of their coop, like, you know what? Because raccoons will take over. They be like, this mine now. Like, have you ever had any problems in managing other animals?
Yeah. So where I live, there across the alley from us is an abandoned building, and we like to call it Raccoon Mansion. There has been 2 separate occasions where we've had raccoons come in and try and attack the chickens. One time they were successful a couple years ago, and so we learned from that and learned to reinforce the coop and the run to make sure that it is completely enclosed and that those little raccoon hands can't be all crafty and try and open it. And fortunately, the second time that it happened, we were able to prevent anything from happening because of the way that it was set up, right? And that's what's really important too, and why it's really important also just they're close by, like within audible distance, because that's been the only indicator to know, if there's ever anything happening with them, so you can go out there and, protect them.
Maybe this is a random one. Obviously, there's so much signage around cleaning up after your animal. What does that process look like? Like, do chickens kind of take care of themselves, or how much cleaning do you have to do around them?
Yeah, so it depends on the methods that you use, right? It's going to vary from chicken keeper to chicken keeper. But for us, the inside of the coop, we use something called the deep litter method, right? Where it basically is just composting over time. We put down diatomaceous earth just to prevent any mites or anything from coming in there. And then you put down a layer of some type of bedding. It can be wood shavings, it can be straw, it can be a mixture of paper shreddings and something else. And then that all can just be composted and turned into really amazing nourishment for, if you have a garden, for example, for any other plants that might be growing. When it comes to the run, it kind of falls into the same category as we see in a lot of other regenerative agriculture, where as those chickens are pecking and scratching around and pooping on the ground, it's actually really, really beneficial for the soil to improve its health. And also by doing that, by improving the soil health, you also improve its water holding capacity, which is something that's pretty important for a city like Chicago, which typically doesn't have animals that are, regularly improving the soil health around here, because we are going to be faced with so many more flooding issues. So yes, talking about cleanliness in the coop and the waste and all that is important, but it's part of this larger cycle. So really recognizing that you're not just gonna, like dog poop, you bag that up, you throw it away, right? And then you got plastic, filled with poop going to a landfill. That's not the case with these types of animals.
Obviously, I've used the word like homeowners, property owners. Is this something for people who might be renting, or even folks who maybe live in a big apartment building? Are there options for maybe communal spots to keep chickens or other animals, or just kind of ways to either work inside of a limited amount of space or with your neighbors?
Yeah, absolutely. So multi-unit buildings are still allowed to keep chickens. It's just a matter of, obviously clearing it with the landlord and talking with your other neighbors about it, because you're all going to be interacting with them in some level, right? I am not entirely certain about the parameters on the number of units as that relates to, yard space and the animals that you can keep there. But I do know that it is possible for multi-unit buildings to be able to keep animals in the backyard as long as there's consensus around it and it's been cleared by the property owner.
Mm-hmm. Now, obviously, I don't want you to speak from like some long historical place, but, obviously, I imagine there were so many more at one point just because of Chicago's history in farming. Chicago's place as a former slaughterhouse. But in your time, has there been any increase or decrease in the amount of maybe stigma around keeping farm animals or keeping like livestock?
If anything, since I've been keeping animals and since I was a kid growing up here, like I have seen a huge increase in the number of people certainly keeping chickens, for sure. Especially, over the pandemic, people really woke up as far as, having food sovereignty, right? And being able to control where your food is coming from when we were having all these supply chain breakdowns and the prices were skyrocketing. So if anything, I've seen more and more people become attracted to being more self-reliant and being able to have more control over their food source.
Viviana Okapwu is with Advocates for Urban Agriculture. We appreciate you so much stopping by CityCast Chicago today.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much.
And you have the dopest chicken names I've ever heard. Queen Mike Tyson is going to be sitting with me for days now. Days. Advocates for Urban Agriculture has a whole list of resources if you're thinking about raising livestock in your backyard, so check the link in the show notes. Before we let you go, a quick reminder, CityCast Chicago does not start and end with the podcast. For the latest headlines and events calendars, some neighborhood guides, head over to our website, chicago.citycast.fm. And remember, we are willing to send you all of these things to your inbox every morning, Monday through Friday for free. All you got to do is subscribe to our Hey Chicago newsletter. Of course, I got some good news for you. The 4th annual Illinois Cannabis Convention kicks off this Friday at the Schaumburg Convention Center. They're gonna have over 100 exhibitions and more than 50 speakers talking on the full spectrum of the Illinois cannabis industry, from growing, distributing, to branding, and so much more. For more information, check the link in the show notes. As always, we appreciate you for reading, listening, taking our listener survey. We're gonna be back bright and early tomorrow. We'll talk to you then. Peace.